All right, let's talk about how a bill becomes a law in the US. And here's a little spoiler alert for you. The real process is, well, it's way more complicated and honestly a lot more brutal than what you probably remembered from those old Saturday morning cartoons. You know what I'm talking about, right? For a lot of us, our very first lesson on how government works came from this super catchy song. You can probably picture it now, that little rolled up piece of paper just sitting there full of hope on the steps of the Capitol. Yup, that's the one, the classic from Schoolhouse Rock back in '76. It taught a whole generation of kids about how laws are made. And it made it look so simple, right? A nice, straight line. But that simple story, that's really just the myth. And today, we're gonna unpack it. So here's our game plan. We'll start with that classic, I'm just a bill story. Then we're diving into the real deal, the legislative gauntlet where most bills die. We'll look at the Senate's big delay tactic, what happens when a bill faces the president's pen, and finally, we'll see just how few bills actually survive the process. All right, so first up, let's just quickly run through that simple story we all learned in school. I mean, on paper, it sounds so easy, doesn't it? An idea becomes a bill, it passes the House, it passes the Senate, the president signs it, boom, it's a law. So simple, so clean. But if it were really that easy, our government would operate completely differently. The reality is much, much more like an obstacle course. Okay, so let's get into the real meat of it. Welcome to the legislative gauntlet. This is where that nice, simple story we just talked about, well, it pretty much gets thrown out the window. Yeah, in the real world, the journey is not a straight line at all. It's a maze. And you see all those dead ends? Before a bill even gets a chance for a full vote, it has to get through all these little traps where it can just quietly die. And most of the time, nobody even notices. And this is the key thing to understand. A bill doesn't have to be loudly defeated. It can just be killed with inaction. If the leadership doesn't put it on the schedule, it's dead. If it gets sent to a committee but the chairperson just doesn't feel like scheduling a hearing, it's dead. Even if it gets a hearing, if that small group in the committee votes it down, you guessed it, it's dead. This committee stage, it's basically a graveyard for most bills. But let's just imagine for a second that a bill does the impossible. It survives the committee gauntlet, and it actually passes the House. Well, once it gets to the Senate, it runs into this massive roadblock, something you don't really see in other modern democracies, the filibuster. So what is a filibuster? Put simply, it's a tactic where you literally talk a bill to death. It's an incredibly powerful way for the minority party to just completely stop the majority from passing something they don't like. And here's the crazy part. Here's why it's so effective. The Senate has this rule that says a senator who has the floor can talk for as long as they want about, well, anything they want. They don't even have to talk about the bill. They could literally stand up there and read the phone book to block a vote. So, is there a way to stop this? How do you end a filibuster? Well, there is. It's a procedure called cloture. And the first step is getting 16 senators together to formally file a motion to end the debate. But that first step, that's the easy part. To actually stop the filibuster, you need a vote. And not just any vote. You need a 3/5 supermajority. That's 60 senators. 60. In the Senate we have today, which is so closely divided, getting 60 votes on pretty much anything is a massive, massive challenge. It effectively makes 60 the magic number to get any major law passed. Okay, so if a bill somehow, against all odds, survives the committees, passes the floor votes, and gets past a filibuster, it finally makes it to the president's desk. But wait, the journey's not over yet. The president actually has two different ways to kill a bill. There's the regular veto, which is what we usually think of. The president sends the bill back to Congress with objections, and Congress can try to fight it. But then there's the pocket veto. This one's a bit sneaky. If Congress goes on a break within 10 days of sending the bill, the president can just do nothing. Let the clock run out. The bill dies. And the really important part is Congress can't do a single thing about it. No override possible. And even with a regular veto, the chances of Congress fighting back and winning are slim. Just look at the history. FDR vetoed 372 bills, only 9 were overwritten. Truman vetoed 180, only 12 got overturned. And the reason it's so tough, to override a veto, you need a 2/3 vote. Not just in one chamber, you need it in both the House and the Senate. That is an incredibly high bar. So let's zoom out and put this all together. When you look at the entire journey, what are the actual odds that a bill makes it out alive? Well, let's start at the end. Since the very beginning, back in 1789, presidents have vetoed bills more than 2,500 times. Just think about that number. It shows you just how powerful that final checkpoint really is. And to put that into perspective, look at this. When a president says no, Congress only succeeds in getting their way about 4% of the time. 96% of the time, the veto stands. The president almost always gets the last word. But remember, the veto is just the final boss. That's after a bill has already survived everything else. When you factor in all the hurdles, the committees, the scheduling, the filibuster, the final numbers are just staggering. For every 100 bills that get introduced in Congress, only about five will ever become law. The other 95% just die somewhere in the process. Which brings us to the big question, really. A system where 95% of proposed laws fail, is that a sign that the system is broken? Or is this exactly how it was designed to work? Is this intense, difficult process, this filter that makes it much easier to stop something than to pass something, exactly what the founders had in mind? It's definitely something to think about.